Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about the next player up in my player profile series, and today we have Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott to me is going to be a really interesting case in terms of fantasy quarterbacks next year, and I think what he can do is going to be absolutely outstanding, so let's jump right into it. I want to start off real quickly with job security. I know people are worried about the fact that he hasn't signed yet. He's going to be the quarterback of the Cowboys, whether he's tagged again or on the first year of a very lengthy extension. Tag this year is about $37 million. If they have to tag him again the next year, I believe it's 51. So Dak is the guy, and one way or another, he's going to get the contract this year and most likely have an extension. From there, you look at his surrounding group, and despite his early successes, it really wasn't a great year for the surrounding cast of the Dallas Cowboys. A lot of major offensive line injuries. Zach Martin, Cam Irving, La'el Collins, Tyron Smith were all hurt at some point throughout the year, some with season-ending injuries. Zeke also gets a full offseason to get himself right. I know he had a lingering calf issue over the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season. That was tough to deal with. Led to him losing the game to Tony Pollard, losing carries. And at the very least, if none of these guys get back to truly 100%, he still has at least Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, one of the best 1-2 punches in the league in terms of receivers. Both still very young, both with a ton of potential. And Gallup might come back, might not, still out there to see. Plenty of guys in this receiver class in terms of free agents or the draft if they choose to spend a mid-round pick that can fill in that third slot. When you look at the tight ends, he has Blake Jarwin and Dalton Schultz, who are both more than capable. Likely one of them is going to be a fantasy tight end one just because the position is so heavily targeted in this offense. And while the defense is still horrible, really doesn't matter to him. Maybe a new coordinator tightens them up, but he still puts up points either way. Moving on from the surrounding cast and how safe his job is exactly, we want to look at his prior production and consistency. Every single year he's been in the league from 2016 up until 2019, where he's played pretty much a full season. He's been a top 10 quarterback in fantasy, and he was most recently coming off a quarterback 2 finish last year. If he held up his point per game average this year of 27.7, he would have finished as the quarterback 1 given he played all 16 games. But that pace was ridiculous. We'll get more into it later. He's also outproduced his ADP every single year. Was drafted as the QB 12 in 2017, finished QB 10. Drafted as the QB 17 in 2018, finished as the QB 10. Drafted as the QB 17 in 2019, again, finished as the QB 2. Was drafted as the QB 3 this year and was likely going to finish QB 1. You know how hard it is to outperform QB 3 ADP? It's ridiculous. And then we don't have data from 2016. Given the fact that he was a rookie taken in the mid rounds, likely you can say he went undrafted. I believe he finished 6th. Going from his ADP to what is quickly becoming one of the most interesting parts of quarterback fantasy production, at least to me, it's something called the Konami code. In short, it's a way to identify quarterbacks who are likely going to be top 12 hits based on their rushing upside. The general cutoff, I believe, is 20% of their production has to come from rushing work, whether that's yardage or touchdowns. I use 20%. That's what Mike from BDGE uses. Trust him, trust them, so I'll use his number. This year, Dak, in the 4 full weeks he played, or actually the 4.5, he had 19.7% of his total points from rushing. That's right on the cusp of that number. He had 13.1% in 2019, which is incredibly low given you want to see 20, but he still finished 2nd overall in terms of quarterbacks. He also had as many rushing touchdowns this year in just over 4 games as he did in 2019, where he played an entire 16-game season. An interesting thing to look at. In 2018, he had 23.3% of his points from rushing. In 2017, he had 27.5%, which is a ridiculous number. And his rookie year, 2016, he had 22.4% of his points from rushing work. He's hit the number all but 2 years, was quarterback 2 the 1 year he didn't, and was on pace to be the quarterback 1 the year he was just barely going to miss it. If you average out his work, he's at 21.6% of his total fantasy production coming from rushing in those 4 full seasons. It's hard to predict, but I definitely think he will hit somewhere around this number next year. I'd say no lower than about 18.5, but I wouldn't be shocked if it hits the high 21s, low 22s, just given what we've seen from him in the past and what it looked like we were going to get from him this year. Shifting from the Konami code, something that's super important, like I said, to probably the main reason I made this video. The pace Dak Prescott was on this year through those 4.5 games was one of the most ridiculous stretches of quarterback play I've ever seen, and would have been an absolute statistical nightmare for any defense that had to go up against him. Over a full season, I'm counting the 4 full games here, weeks 1, 2, 3, and 4, not counting the quarter or half of 5. He would have thrown for 6,760 passing yards with 36 passing touchdowns, 350 rushing yards, and 12 rushing touchdowns. That would have been utterly ridiculous, by far the most we would have ever seen in league history. If you put that and you make it fantasy points off of 4 point per passing touchdown, it would have been 500.8. The second greatest fantasy season for a quarterback since '97, only trailing Peyton Manning in 2013. Sure, it will likely be hard for him to hold or even replicate that pace at any point going into next year, but I think that just kind of shows the upside that Dak Prescott can have in this type of offense. Even though they tend to feed Zeke and they gave him around 18 to 22 carries in those games, Dak was still slinging to everybody. He was producing, he was getting it done through the air, on the ground, both ways you want it done, both ways it was just ridiculous. He would have been an absolutely incredible season. And like I said, I doubt he recreates it, but if he comes anywhere close to this and gives you 5K through the air, 30 passing touchdowns, 8 rushing touchdowns, and 200 rushing yards, that's still an incredible season. It's going to be hard to replicate that once again, like I said, but just let that be a source of inspiration as to what he could do next year. So taking all that and kind of breaking down what exactly we should do with it, I definitely think, mostly because of the injury and the rise of other quarterbacks around him, we see Dak fall a bit from his ADP of quarterback 3. I think guys like Mahomes, Allen, Murray, Watson, Herbert, and Rodgers are almost guaranteed to go above him or near him. That's 6 guys. I think maybe you get Lamar Jackson if people aren't scared off by the very rough first 12 weeks of the season he had. Maybe Russell Wilson if people aren't scared off by the terrible last 6 weeks of the season he had. And maybe Brady if people are buying into this offense, especially if they do well in the postseason. That's 9 guys right there, which would possibly put him at quarterback 10 in terms of coming off the board. I don't think it's entirely realistic he goes that late. I think you're more likely to see 7 or 8. But that's still a ridiculous bargain for a guy who was producing like this and was likely going to put up back-to-back top 3 quarterback seasons. That's just insane value that you're going to get. If you want to look at ADP, when you think about that, quarterback 3 this year was pick 40. So right around the end of that 4th round, maybe part of the 3rd if you're in a 12-man league. And quarterback 7 was pick 70. There is a 3-round difference between quarterback 3 and quarterback 7, with a point per game difference of under 3. I believe it's 2.8. That's a ridiculous drop-off for guys who really don't outproduce the person 4 spots below them. It's another death knell to the thing that you need to take quarterbacks early. You don't need to. You can get a guy like Dak Prescott at this point, who I believe is going to be there in rounds 6 to 8. Because like I said, Allen's definitely gone before him. So is Mahomes. So is Murray. So is Watson. So is Herbert. At least I think. So is Rodgers, and you have Wilson, Lamar, and Brady, who are all probably going to be grouped into some sort of tier with him in most lists, which I don't think is right, as I've said. I think he's easily going to finish as a top 3 quarterback, and if he is just sitting there in around 6 to 8, you almost have to take him, especially if you need a quarterback. Granted, in Superflex, 2 quarterback, this gets a bit dicey. I'm just talking about 1 quarterback, no Superflex redraft type leagues. I think the value is absolutely there, and it's a steal. They're handing you a top 3 quarterback if he's sitting there that late. To wrap up my little happy piece about Dak Prescott, like I said, without a doubt, I think Dak finishes as a top 3 quarterback in 2021. He was on an absolutely ridiculous pace that even if he doesn't hold or come close to, he will still produce at an elite level for you in fantasy. He more or less fits the Konami code. He was 0.3% away this year and obliterated it every other year. The year he didn't was actually his best statistical year and best fantasy finish. Kind of weird, but good to see that you can get the high finish with and without the Konami code from him. And he's coming back to play for a contract. I haven't had to mention that really once, outside of the fact that saying he will be a Dallas Cowboy, but he will still likely have that financial factor on his back, knowing that he has to prove himself yet again coming off injury. That's just more motivation onto the fire, but I don't think that's really been needed until right now. His statistical work and his game and what he fits speak for itself. And I think the possibility of grabbing a top 3 quarterback in the 7th, 8th round is absolutely nuts, especially when it's something you can see coming this far away. It almost seems inevitable that most outlets are going to fade Dak because of the injury, because all these hot names rose up. And in terms of just purely ADP and the result that happens, it's going to be similar to grabbing Josh Allen in the 7th or 8th. Obviously, there are differences. Dak is more proven than Josh Allen was. Allen was coming off of improvement second year. No one expected the third-year breakout. But I think in terms of purely getting a top 3 guy in the 7th or 8th round, it's similar in that way. If you manage to get Dak this late 6th, 7th, 8th round, you're going to get the steal of your draft at the quarterback position. There's no other way around it. The production you're going to get from him is going to be absolutely elite. The injury, as far as I've seen, nothing is stopping him from coming back 100%. Doesn't really seem to be something that will inhibit your ability to play football. ACL tears tend to linger. Achilles tears tend to do the same thing, cause you problems later on. His clean break of the ankle really shouldn't cause him any injuries once the season rolls around. That's going to be it, guys. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. If you didn't, leave a dislike, comment telling me why. I know it's the episode 2. It came a while after the Eckler one. I don't know, stroke of inspiration hit me, and I was like, fuck it, let's talk about Dakota Prescott, the man, the myth, the oikos yogurt legend. Love those commercials, and I love what Dak Prescott can do for you next year in fantasy. See ya.